South Korea rejected Boeing's bid to supply 60 fighter jets. What does that mean for Boeing? Tim Logan, St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter, joins us via the phone. Good morning, Tim. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
Good. So this is how big of a surprise is this? Boeing was the last company standing.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising. I mean, they had been considered the favorite basically because of the three companies that bid on the job. They were the only ones that came in under South Korea's budget, and South Korean law, I guess, requires them to stay under budget. So what happened overnight in Seoul was that the South Korean Defense Ministry basically decided that they were going to go back out and rebid this contract instead of taking Boeing's offer, which is too bad for a lot of people here. I mean, the 2,000 people work building that plane in St. Louis.
Yeah. The reason they rejected Boeing's claim was what?
Well, basically, they wanted a more advanced aircraft. The F-15 has been around a long time, and it's what's referred to as I believe, a third-generation aircraft. Boeing had upgraded it considerably, adding they call this the Silent Eagle because it has some new stealth capabilities. But some people in the Korean military, a bunch of retired generals in particular, said that we really need a fifth-generation aircraft, something with even more capacity and stealth capability and that sort of thing. Basically, to do business against the North Koreans. So they said, we're going to hold off and we're going to see if we can get a more advanced plane at a better price. So
they're now going to send the whole thing out to rebid again?
Yes, and that'll take about a year. Lockheed Martin's Joint Strike Fighter was, which is a fifth-generation plane. It's pretty much the most advanced fighter jet in the world. Was also in this competition. They couldn't meet at the time. They couldn't meet South Korea's budget requirements. But since then, they've sold more planes, which has the effect of lowering the price per plane, and they may be able to offer a lower price about a year from now when this contract is expected to be rebid. The
famous F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is billions over budget, and I don't even think, has that flown yet?
It is starting to fly in testing for the U.S. military, but yeah, no, it is far over budget and far over its timeline. Of course, this is the plane that Lockheed beat Boeing out for about 10 years ago, and unfortunately for Boeing, it is becoming the premier plane in fighter jet in the world at this point. Most of the bigger U.S. allies now are buying F-35s, the Joint Strike Fighters. The Navy is still buying Boeing Super Hornet, but most other U.S. military contracts are for F-35s. So this is becoming a problem for fighter jet production in St. Louis.
But what now? But you said the F-35 is starting to fly. It's nowhere near ready, and it's nowhere near combat ready. Correct?
No, it's not near combat ready. It probably won't be for several more years. But building a fighter jet is a long process, and these planes are designed to last for 30 or 40 years. So they're the Koreans are. This isn't a 5-year decision that they're making. This is a 40-year decision.
Right. So where does Boeing? So does Boeing try and rebid this next round?
They this morning they put out a statement early this morning, and they were sort of non-committal. I mean they upgraded the F-15 for this, and they were confident in their product. They say basically that they're going to wait and see. They're going to talk with the South Koreans and kind of get a better sense of where things go from here. The word they use is we're awaiting details on its basis for the delay, and they're evaluating their next options. So they could certainly put in another bid, but the message from the Koreans was pretty much, we want a more advanced aircraft than this F-15, and we're willing to wait another year to get it.
Interesting. All right, what does this mean? Tim, for jobs in the region, and/or is it too early to tell?
Well, in the short run, it won't mean much. Saudi Arabia bought $11.4 billion worth of F-15s about a year and a half ago. And so that contract will keep the F-15 production line here going for almost pretty much through the end of the decade. So that's good. I mean, the jobs, this loss today will not have any short-term impact on employment at Boeing. But in the long run, it's another example of this trend away from the older McDonnell Douglas planes like the F-15 and the C-17 and towards more advanced fighter jets that Boeing doesn't make. So that 10 years from now, it raises some questions about if we'll still be making fighter jets here in St. Louis, and how many people will be employed doing it, put it that way.
What about the F-18? Where are we on that?
The F-18 does all right. The delays in the Joint Strike Fighter have been helpful. They got a new multi-year contract from the Navy for the F-18 a couple years ago. They're out there shopping it to more foreign militaries as well. Brazil is looking to buy a bunch of fighters, and the F-18 is certainly in the mix for that. But that's kind of what it's coming to. You know, the Air Force and the Pentagon in general are not. I mean, they don't have the money to buy a lot of fighter jets these days, and all the money they do have is going into the Joint Strike Fighter program. So Boeing is out there looking for international customers, and international customers they're there, but they're not as they don't buy as many, and they buy them less frequently, and they sometimes change their mind at the last minute, like South Korea did.
Yeah.
So it's a harder road. That is a harder road, but it is the road that Boeing's sort of facing at this point.
This Lockheed Martin F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is 10 years in the making, billions overrun. It's almost like, do you throw good money after bad money? When do you pull the plug, and do you keep on riding this horse even though it's billions over budget and years late?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good question, but I think to borrow a term from the banking industry, the Joint Strike Fighter is probably too big to fail at this point. They'll keep pushing that one, and it is getting better. It is getting closer. So it's interesting. There was a big, long article in Vanity Fair just last week about the development of the Joint Strike Fighter, and it's incredibly technologically complex, and that's it's more engineering than any software engineering than anything else. But it's an incredibly complex plane, and that's why it's running. It's also trying to do a lot of different things because it's got to be used by the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marines, all for different sorts of missions. So, but they spent so much money on that plane that that's where the future lies. But in the meantime, Boeing is still shopping the Super Hornet to the Navy in particular, and the Navy continues to express interest in buying it. So that's good news.
Is it the F-15 or the F-18? One of them, or maybe even both. You know this probably better than I do, but one of them we've never lost one of them in combat, right?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know which of them that is. I know the F-18 is a more advanced plane and is the workhorse of the Navy fleet, and the F-15 has been around for a long time and been in a lot of combat. So it's a good question. I'm not sure which is that, but they're both very good planes.
Yeah, both very good, very very well made, and have performed above and beyond the Call of Duty for many, many years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right. So, and the C-17 was shut down, right? They stopped making those, too, recently.
It's kind of a similar situation in some ways. I mean, just last week, Boeing came out and said that they're going to end production of the C-17 in 2015, which means that the ones that are in, it takes two plus years to build a C-17, so the ones that are in process now are the last ones they will build. And what happened there was, another great plane that has done and continues to do a lot of good work for the U.S. Air Force and for our allies around the world. But the reality is there's only so big a market for large transcontinental military cargo planes. And they made about 230 for the Air Force. They made a couple dozen for international customers like the United Kingdom and Australia. They've got a few more in the pipeline for India. They're making a few on spec, but there's only so many countries that really need these things. And so they last a very long time. So they basically ran out of customers, and they said that they're gonna close down that line, which is no big surprise. I mean, they've been winding that down for a while, but again, that's going to be, I think it's 3,000 people at Boeing. Most of them in this case are in California, who will be either losing their jobs or switching to other platforms as that program winds down over the next couple of years.
Yeah, Tim, it's the F-15 I was thinking of. That is never lost in air-to-air combat. So that's an
great plane.
That's an extraordinary record for the workers there at Boeing. Tim Logan, great job as always. Great for the insight. Great work as always. St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter Tim Logan. Tim, why don't you Skype in next time?
I'll see what I can do.
All right, good.
I'll have to put on a shirt then.
Yes, okay. Please put a shirt on.
You'd like that.
That's a visual image.
Well, thanks a lot, sir. Good talking to you.
You got it. Thanks. Tim Logan here, shirtless Tim Logan, St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter. That is an interesting visual early this morning at 8:40.